Hey listeners, today we are here with Ryan Gillespie. Ryan is a healthcare real estate agent with none other than Carr. For anyone that doesn't know, Carr is one of the nation's leading providers of commercial real estate services within the healthcare realm. If you've ever worked with Ryan in the past, then I have no doubt that you can vouch for just how amazing he is at what he does, which is exactly why I asked him to join us. Ryan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, awesome. So, funny story, you and I have been running in the same circles for a while now. It actually turns out that we have some mutual friends, that we've worked with some of the same practices, and we even live in the same town, which I think is crazy. But it's true what they say about dental, right? Like the dental world is such a large industry, but it really is a small world.
Absolutely. No, it is a small world, and that's why it's good to have high quality work and, take care of your customers because, yeah, word does travel.
Yeah, absolutely. It does. Your reputation is everything in our world. So, Ryan, share with our listeners a little bit about who you are.
Yeah, thanks, Denae. My name's Ryan Gillespie, and I'm a commercial real estate agent. Our our name technically is Carr, but most of the agents refer to it as Carr Healthcare Realty because we are niched within the healthcare space. Okay, so my role is I help dentists through real estate transactions for their practice. Okay, so not residential, but strictly commercial real estate. Okay. So the transactions that I'm involved in are startups, relocations, expansions, purchases, additional offices, lease renewals, practice transitions as well. That one's becoming increasingly common. So yeah, I cover Michigan and Indiana, but we have agents across the country, and we're all on the same team and have a united focus and mission. So for me, though, my purpose as an agent is to put my clients' needs and wants above my own. I work very hard for my clients to ensure that we achieve the best possible outcome on every deal. I'm not the type of agent that has commission breath, and I'm the type that will play the short and the long game with clients, whatever they need, and put opportunities in front of my clients that are best for them, not always necessarily for me. So yeah, that's a little bit about myself.
I love that. Awesome. So, how did you stumble into healthcare real estate specifically? I feel like that's such a niche piece of the real estate world. Were you always interested in real estate? Was it healthcare? Like, how did you get where you are right now?
Yeah, that's a good question. I have kind of a unique background, although that is the case with many car agents across the country. I didn't have a background in healthcare or real estate prior. Real estate was always an area I was passionate about. I had worked as an engineering headhunter for 13 years at a previous company, and actually one of my best friends, roommate in college, he works for Carr in Denver. He reached out to me and informed me about the role and kind of the mission for Carr. Some of the impacts he's made for his clients, and I had to do it. So I've been really grateful that I made the shift. I've been here 4 years, and it's been an awesome experience. With Carr, if I could add this as well, when we're attracting talent around the country, previous experience in commercial real estate is not a requirement. We're strictly seeking talent and character, and we will train the skill. We'll train the industry. We'll wait for those to get their real estate license, and we'll help mentor them and get them up to speed. And for me, the the learning about dental has been just as much of an undertaking as it has been to learn about commercial real estate. And that has been quite the journey as well, just to learn all the ins and outs of dentistry and just making sure that I'm best serving my clients.
I love that. I feel like that's the secret sauce in so many, it's not just our industry, right? Or real estate's industry. That is the secret sauce in being a successful business is you don't hire because of the skill set necessarily. You hire because of the character, right? Like that's what Chick-fil-A does. Chick-fil-A goes, they bring all of their buyers in through an intense interview process. And it's not even about, do you know how to run a business or have you ever worked in the food industry? It's about their character. It's about knowing that they give back to the community, that they're involved in their community, that they have a solid character. And that's the same thing in dental too, right? Like that's what I teach my practices all day long. Don't hire a hygienist because they have a license, solely because they have a license. Hire them because you know that they have a good character and that they're going to be a good fit for your practice. So I think that you saying that about Carr, that screams volumes about the organization that you're with in general.
Absolutely. No, I echo that same sentiment. And, as a previous headhunter, I can speak to the same as far as successful placements. Companies that attract character and talent themes over just strictly experience end up having more successful hires, not just for the short term, but also for the long term, retaining their employees and building a culture. So undoubtedly, if you find the right people, they'll figure it out.
I love that. So, what has been, this is going to be a really corny question, but what's your favorite part about what you do?
That's a good question. My favorite part is serving my clients and kind of putting their needs above mine. And I know that equally maybe sounds cheesy, but I do really enjoy making an impact for clients. I keep a chart on every deal that I'm working on and every client that I'm serving, and I keep a tally on how much money I save them on every single deal. And there's some deals where we have to go at market rate just because it's a very competitive market and there's lots of competition. But in most of the deals, there's tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars on the line in every deal. And I really enjoy making that impact for my client and saving them that money on the transaction. And then, hopefully giving them a little bit more breathing room on a deal so that they can reinvest those dollars into dental equipment or into, their interior build out finishes or whatever it may be, just to make sure that, that they're being taken care of. So yeah, in many cases, we're saving $100,000, $200,000 on a deal, which is a lot of money, especially for a small business owner. It's fun to be a part of that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I can tell you that the clients that like we happen to have worked together with, they're raving fans about you. And they say exactly that you're not in this because of your own gains. You're in this because you truly want to help them. And it's almost like a fun game, right? How much can we help these particular, practice owners?
Yeah. And commercial real estate is a field where everything is 100% negotiable. Everything's on the line, and it can be a little ambiguous at times, especially for a dental practice owner who may not have expertise in these commercial real estate deals. You shouldn't expect for them to. Their expertise is being a clinician. And many of them are extremely savvy, but most of them, it's a case of if you're not involved in these commercial real estate deals on a week in, week out basis, sometimes landlords or sellers can be a little slick in how they present things. And, it definitely makes sense to have expert representation to step in and evaluate a deal and help you posture and negotiate.
Absolutely. Yeah. Dentists go to school to do dentistry, right? That's what they love. And typically your dentist is going to be a very artistic human being because that's part of being a dentist is having the eye for art. Same thing with people like you, right? Where you're the professional in the commercial real estate. They're the professionals in dentistry. People like me, right? We're the professionals in consulting and helping grow practices. So it's like really important that you go to people that are the experts within that field so that you don't end up getting taken advantage of.
Well said.
I love it. All right, Ryan. So over the last few weeks, we've been digging into just how important it is to stay focused on goals, to know your goals, to know where you're headed, both in the short term and in the long term, and to keep your eyes on the prize, even if that prize changes along the way, ultimately to always be working towards something. Now, some of our listeners might be working towards purchasing their first practice. Maybe they're looking to open their second or their third or their fourth location. Maybe they're looking to relocate to a bigger building, or maybe they're starting to think about retirement and they want to start looking at their options of selling their practice. Now, these are all really great things that practices, owners can be working towards and things that truly will change their lives. But if they want the best deal, they want the smoothest process, and they want the most successful outcome, there are things that they can do to proactively help them along the way. And I'm sure that you're no stranger to the practices that are ready to go. They've checked off all the boxes. They can list their practice or they can purchase a practice yesterday. And then I'm also sure that you're no stranger to practices that still have a ways to go because of one reason or another. What are some things that you would recommend to somebody trying to take the leap to either purchase or sell a practice in today's market? Like, what are some things that they can start actively looking at as they get ready to take that leap?
Yeah. Great question. And I'm glad you hit on this because yeah, there's some key points here that I want to hit on. Number one is start the planning process well in advance of an eventual transaction. Okay. For someone looking to purchase real estate or sell, but I guess for sake of this discussion, I'll stay on the purchase side. I would recommend that a dentist start the planning process 18 to 24 months in advance. Me personally, I would stick to about 24 months. But if we want to cut it short, 18 months, we can still get a deal done in many cases. So if they are looking to lease space, about 12 months in advance should do. Okay. So the calls that I get every now and then, a few times a year are, that are often interesting is when I get a call from a client and they only have like 4 months to work with, and that's where it can get kind of difficult because when you look at permitting and construction and build outs and all that, just negotiations, legal, it's hard to squeeze all that in a 4 month window. In many cases, it's just not feasible. So we have to get creative. And in some cases we can, but anyways, start the planning process early. Okay. 1 to 2 years in advance. The second thing I'd like to say is to have multiple options. So there's a kind of a principle in commercial real estate, and it's that those who have the most options win. So as a buyer or someone seeking a lease space, you want to have multiple options when you're going into a deal. If a landlord sniffs out that they're your only option, or a seller, then that could hurt you from a posturing standpoint. But if a landlord or seller feels like they are one of three options that you have that are legitimate options on the table, it can benefit you tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars on a deal. The third point, which in my opinion is pretty obvious, but hire representation. Okay. Hire someone who has no conflicts of interest, isn't representing a landlord or seller in any way, that is strictly representing you as a buyer or tenant, and let them go to work for you. One unique fact in these deals is that in commercial real estate, similar to residential, commissions are paid by the seller. Okay. And I know there's been some change with residential commissions, but not as much on the commercial side. Commissions are negotiable, but usually what happens in most of these deals is a seller or landlord will market their space, okay, for sale or for lease. And they're usually expecting to pay some sort of real estate fee, okay? In most deals, they'll hire a listing agent who negotiates a gross commission. For example's sake, let's just say it's 6%, okay? So what happens is if a buyer or tenant comes in without representation, that listing agent collects all 6%, which is referred to as a double commission. Okay. So if I'm involved representing the tenant or buyer, the listing agent usually just splits that with me 50-50. So we each get 3%. So it doesn't negatively impact the economic terms of the deal for the seller because they're paying that 6% either way. Okay. Basically also what I'm saying though is the buyer doesn't pay me anything. Okay. Or tenant. So I'm representing them, trying to help negotiate on their behalf, to get most favorable terms, and then they don't have to pay me a penny in most cases. So it's a pretty attractive situation to be. So if you're, again, if you're looking to buy or lease real estate, you might as well hire professional representation because it could help save you money, and then also, in most cases, you're not footing the bill. So, and the last thing I'll say is surround yourself with a team. And Denae, you kind of hit on this earlier. Talk to a lender early, talk to your dental consultant, hire commercial real estate representation, talk to your dental equipment or territory reps, your CPA, your general contractor, whatever it may be. Surround yourself with a team if you want to achieve a most favorable outcome. Because if you do, you're going to have people looking out for you that have good intentions and that are going to help, take care of you throughout the deal.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And to go back to character and reputation, right? There could potentially be people out there that are sitting in certain roles that maybe don't always have the best interest. So make sure that you do your due diligence and you figure out, hey, does this person have a really good reputation that I'm working with? Have they had or been successful in previous deals, right? So that character, that reputation, when you're trying to build your team is going to go a really long way. And also to touch on make sure that you might as well hire a professional that's going to be on your team. It sounds like because the seller or the opposite person is the one that's typically paying out the commission for someone like yourself, right, Ryan? You're hiring somebody on your team that truly is, the better a deal that you get, the better they're going to end up being as well. So it's a win-win. It's not that they're working against you. You're truly working with these practice owners, because the better deal that they get, the better off that you're going to be as well.
Undoubtedly. Undoubtedly. So, my job, I'm a big fan of Stephen Covey, Seven Habits of Highly Successful People. And in that, he talks about win-win or no deal, So part of my job is to make sure that I'm advocating for my client, seeking a win for them to win a deal. But at the end of the day, if the seller doesn't feel like it's a win for them, then there's likely no deal. Okay. So, I forget who told me this a while back, but every deal is kind of like a rubber band. You want to stretch it as far as you can to get a deal done, but you don't want to break it. So you have to be careful, because each deal is delicate in its own way. And there's a little bit of an art and science to it.
Yeah, absolutely. So you had mentioned start getting ready a year to 2 years in advance. What are some things that they can do to start getting ready a year or 2 years in advance?
That's a good question. I would say, number one, talk to a commercial real estate broker. They can start scouring the market. They can look for inventory, depending on your situation. If you're looking to lease, looking to buy, or maybe you don't know, maybe you're open to both and want to see what the best option available is. Let a commercial real estate broker scour the market for you, network, look for everything on the MLS, look for maybe pocket listings for sale by owner, any and all, so that you can holistically kind of look at what the best options are available to you. So I think that's a great starting point. Talking to a lender, I think, is also very critical in advance, and just getting a feel from a lender or two how they're going to structure the deal. Is it going to be a conventional loan? Is it going to have to go through the SBA? What are the requirements of that lender in terms of pre-qualification, and just getting everything sort of teed up from there? Because, every lender is different in terms of what their requirements are. And, there's a chance that during your pre-qualification process that maybe your financials aren't structured exactly the way that they want things to be structured. So that if you're starting in advance, it at least gives you time to get more cash on hand, or, modify your savings and whatever, that they require. So yeah, talking to a lender is critical. Having a broker get to work for you is great. And then, I would suggest, talking to your dental consultant as well, as far as just looking at the viability of your practice and looking at things like return on investment. What will this deal do for my practice, and how will it affect the 5 or 10 year projections for my practice? Is great, just to make sure that there's, there's a little bit of art and science to this, and that we're not just, kind of firing off the hip. There are also, if depending on location, there are market studies you can do to look at feasibility of a particular market, or if you're flexible on where you want to do a deal. We can look at things like demographic reporting, heat map analysis, look at like doctor to patient ratios, just to kind of see where the right spot might be. So we can really look at this analytically as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. And I think that at the end of the day, right, we never know when life is going to happen. And so if there are things, and you had mentioned this too, you want to give yourself a year or 2 years in advance, because if you don't have enough cash on hand, you need to make sure that you give yourself enough time to get the cash on hand. One of the things that I typically, as a consultant, will tell practices, you want to plan for the unexpected. And so even if you're not expecting to purchase or to sell or to have a transition, maybe an expansion or a relocation, even if you're not expecting it to happen in the next 1 or 2 years, start building up that cash. Start building up that safety net, so that if life does happen, you're going to be ready for whatever, it is coming your way. Cash is not everything, but cash definitely makes life easier. If you have it on hand, you know that if something like COVID were to happen, that you can either cover your practice, or there were a lot of dentists when COVID happened that decided, you know what, I'm just going to go into retirement. And if you have that cash on hand, and when something like that happens, you're going to be on a whole nother playing field, because you're going to be ready for that transition. So making sure, right, like you've got the cash on hand. Another thing too that you had mentioned is your demographic, and knowing what exactly it is that you're looking for. Do you want to be a doctor with just the one dentist with multiple hygienists? Or do you want to have you and multiple associates in multiple locations? Like, knowing what you're working towards is also going to help give you clarity about what kind of market you're looking at, So all of these things are things you have to start thinking about before you're ready to actually pull the plug a year or 2 years in advance. And then when you're there, what other things, Ryan, like possibly like reports, right? Have you seen maybe, and you had mentioned this too, where your lender might not be ready to do funding because maybe your books don't look the way that they want them to look.
Sure.
It's often that dentists will run things through the book through their business that aren't necessarily always through the business, right? Like sometimes the books aren't as clean as we want them to be. And so making sure that your books are super clean, like squeaky clean before you go in for funding or any of that stuff, can that also help them as well?
Undoubtedly. I think and that is part of the reason why it's great to have a consultant to help, just make sure that you're positioned well as you go to your lender. But, I think the point you hit on is, I think a lot of the lenders are known for saying cash is king. In a lot of these deals, they would rather than pay off debt, they would rather you save cash. And please, corroborate that with your lender. In many cases, they want to know what's going to happen should there be a ebb and flow or whatever, that you do have cash on hand to help just kind of keep things going. And that can be really, really, really helpful. But to your, we both kind of hit on this. You might as well talk to a lender early rather than in the due diligence process of a deal, because you want to build that relationship too, because a lot of these banks have really solid relationship managers and they can do a great job in taking care of you. And that's another part of role I guess I can play in this process, is connect you, kind of be a matchmaker with maybe who the right lender is for your situation. I've gotten to know these deals quite a bit. So, if it's an SBA deal, that can help me, make the right matchmaking. If it's more of a conventional deal, I know who the typical lenders are in the dental space that will do certain types of deals. But there's some lenders that are much stronger with startups, and there's other lenders that are much stronger with construction projects, ground up, and are willing to they have more of an appetite for that. So I can help get you integrated with the right lenders so that you're not having to dance with too many people.
I love that. I love that. Don't try to do it yourself, right? Like
Yeah.
don't try to pinch pennies and, save yourself a little bit of money, because at the end of the day, this is what you do. You've built the relationships, you have the connections, what is going to end up being a better outcome for the client at the end of the day. And that's worth every cent of bringing somebody like you on, because then they're going to know. They're going to know, hey, I'm in really good hands. I'm getting sent to the right vendors, right? Like these are all things that a lot of times, if we don't do this every day, we don't think about it. And so super important to make sure, like Ryan had said, that you're building a team around yourself and you're bringing in people to help guide you during the process. So I love that, Ryan. I wanted to talk a little bit about the market. So you had mentioned like you guys can run market demographics and things like that. Is there anything specific regarding the market that you would recommend a practice owner look at? Like things that they start thinking about before they decide where they want to go?
That's a really good question. You kind of hit on the demographics. My advice to clients that are flexible on location is to go to a local bar or a local restaurant that's, around the corner of where you're looking to start up or set up or purchase, and just take a look around. Because these are going to be your typical patients, that are coming through the practice. It can be a kind of a good, I guess, anecdotal research or whatever, just to kind of see like what is the demographic you're going for, and does it align? I think as far as market studies go, although Carr doesn't do them specifically, I can connect you with companies that do this research. But in general, what they're going to do, they're going to look at demographics. They're going to look at heat maps of where other dentists are at. They're going to look at insurances and just to see what the viability is from a ratio standpoint. For example, for like a general dentist, what they're looking for is they want to see at least 2,000 residents for every one general dentist. Okay. So if they see that 2,000 to 1 ratio, that's a good sign that, that this is a feasible market. If you can get it down to like 1,500 to 1, like that's holy grail. That's really good ratios there. The other thing I'd like to add is those ratios aren't everything. Okay. You may get a report back and it may say 3,000 to 1 or something like that. Or it may be off where it doesn't look viable. And if you can get to know the market and see who the other dentists are that are practicing in your market, it can help create a game plan as to how viable your business may be. Because, for example, like if I'm working with a startup dentist who is going to be really into, let's say, technology, and there's other dentists that are in a particular market that are getting ready to retire, and let's say that they're capped, they're not growing patient base, so if you can set up to another dentist who's getting ready to retire, there's multiple dentists in a particular area that are getting ready to exit the market. Even if the ratios don't add up, it can still be an attractive market for you to set up shop and capture that business, especially if you see that many of these dentists in a particular market aren't accepting new patients at the time, So there's a lot more to the story than just getting a data report package. And that's some things that we can look at and investigate anecdotally throughout the process. So yeah, there's a lot you can do. My advice is study your market, get to know it. These data reporting packages are fantastic, but that intimate knowledge of a market, in my opinion, is even better. And that just requires, a little bit of sweat equity.
Yeah, I love that. You're dropping gold right now, right? I love, Ryan, what you said of go to the local area and just sit there and observe, because these are your patients. These will be your patients. So that ideal patient, that person that needs the dental work that you love to do, that like fires you up every day to wake up and get out of bed, that's the patient that you're looking for. And so if you can truly close your eyes and you can picture what that person looks like, right? Where do they hang out? What do they like to do? Those are the places that you can go. Go sit at those places and look around and see, well, A, are there places like this in the area that's going to attract the type of patient that I'm looking for? And B, what are these people looking for, right? And so I love what you said about before you even sign on a dotted line or start looking at a certain market, go there, sit at the bar, sit at the golf club, go sit somewhere that's going to attract that ideal patient, and ask yourself, is this truly going to be a good market for me? I love that, Ryan.
Awesome.
Cool. All right. So I have another question. The due diligence process. This is something that a lot of people, I think it surprises a lot of people once you get into the nitty gritty of the due diligence process, because maybe they're asking for things that we didn't expect them to ask for. Can you shed some light on what to expect during the due diligence process once you get to that point?
Sure. Yeah. Once you get a property under contract, whether you're buying land or buying a building or buying a practice, if you're using a loan, there's a very similar process regardless of the situation. Okay. So, as far as what you can expect, the due diligence process varies. Usually, it's about the lender and the title company and what they're expecting their requirements are going to be, but typically it ranges between 45 and 90 days. Okay, so that's very different than residential real estate. In residential, you make an offer, it's accepted, maybe you do an inspection, maybe you don't, but in many cases you can close in a week or two. Done. It's microwavable. These commercial deals sort of bake in the oven. Okay, they take a little bit longer. There's a lot more requirements. It's a very different process. So I like to set the tone with that right off the bat. Okay. So 45 to 90 days is typical for due diligence. And, like I said, depending on the style of loan, but for the most part, most lenders are going to require what's called a survey. Okay. Or an ALTA survey. They're basically just looking at kind of the boundary lines of the property. They're also looking at the feasibility of a property should you build, just to see, the undulation and the topography. Okay. If you need to add a basement, another service will come out and do what's called a boring test. And they will, basically drill a hole 20 feet down and just, test for water. A phase 1 environmental is also required. Okay. And in many cases, and that's basically an environmental soil sample test just to make sure that there's no contamination. And the reason they're looking for this is they're getting ready to loan you a fair amount of money, and they want to make sure that when they loan you that and you build a building, that there's nothing that would prevent you from practicing dentistry at this particular location. And if there's contamination under the soil, that could be a problem. Okay, so we're trying to do our due diligence, do our homework, just to make sure that after you invest X amount of dollars, that it's going to be a safe investment. So if you're buying an existing building, you have the opportunity to do a commercial inspection, just looking at, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, roof, all that kind of stuff, just to, again, assess what the scope of the work for a project may be, if a project is required. A lender's they're gonna require an appraisal. So that's another piece, just to sort of back up the value, make sure that that value matches with what the offer was. During this time, the 45 to 90 days, this is also your window to get a head start on your design should you do a construction project. So to work through with an architect or a designer, get those plans completed and get bids. Okay. This is also your opportunity to get bids from general contractors, just to know what you're looking at from a total cost standpoint. So yeah, that's a little bit of a snapshot. And one little, I guess, tidbit that I have found helpful is for my clients that are buying existing buildings and looking or leasing and looking to do an interior build out. In many cases, you can work with an equipment supplier like a Patterson or a Benco, so on and so forth. And in many cases, they'll actually do some of the conceptual design work for free. Okay. So I try to take advantage of that rather than hiring an architect and having to pay, kind of a contingency cost. You can work with your local Patterson rep and they can actually get measurements, do a design, and a contractor can bid off of that design. And you don't have to spend any money doing that, which is super attractive in my opinion. And then should that design, be selected, you can have an architect stamp that drawing for the mechanicals and electricals and plumbings, just to make sure that everything's good before, taking that project into fruition. So yeah, sorry if that was a bit much, but yeah, there's a lot. I guess in summary, there's a lot in the due diligence period, and it's great to have someone helping you through that process, as well as connecting you with the right surveyors, the right phase one companies, the right inspectors, contractors for bids, so on and so forth. And that's a role I can play, is sort of continuing to stay in that quarterback role during the due diligence and making sure that we're making the most of that time frame.
Absolutely. So it sounds like once you get to the due diligence step process, it's like, okay, now put our heads down and let's get to work. Let's get through this as fast as we can, but make sure that you're covering everything in a way that's going to create like a win-win for the practice or the future practice, right? And so having somebody like yourself, Ryan, that can almost project manage the process would make the process so much less stressful for the buyer or for the seller. I love that. Now, one thing that I've seen that a lot of times surprises, especially the new business owners or new practice owners, is oftentimes the bank might ask for life insurance, for a certain life insurance policy or dollar amount in order to fund your transaction. Is this something that you've seen? Have you seen that this surprises buyers?
That's a really good point. And yes, it does surprise buyers often. And I did leave that out. But that is definitely a key piece here, is that in order to secure one of these loans and close on the property, the bank will require, in most cases, a life insurance policy just as collateral. It does help the bank sort of secure their investment, as in many cases, there's a lot of risk they're taking on. So yeah, pretty common, pretty typical. And I try to let my clients know that that's just, part of the process, and probably not a bad idea to have a policy like that in the first place, so yeah, very common.
Yeah, absolutely. Last thing I wanted to touch on, negotiations. You had mentioned it earlier during the podcast as well, but there is a lot of power that you have when it comes to negotiating the deals. It's not always just set in stone. Can you share a little bit more about negotiations? What might be negotiable? What's like hard? These are not negotiable. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, the negotiation piece starts day one. Once you start making phone calls on properties, evaluating listings, it all starts there. So I guess I'd like to stress on hiring representation early. Okay. In many cases, I've had clients start evaluating properties, start communicating with listing agents before me, and reveal critical information to the listing agents that can hurt our posture. So have a buyer or tenant agent do that work for you. Okay. So I just want to start there. The second piece, which we hit on before, whoever has the most options win. So play the market, get multiple options, whether you're looking to lease or purchase real estate, have those options. And, that's part of my job, is to delicately inform, all the listing agents that we have multiple options. Okay. So that if we're going to do a deal, it needs to be, favorable terms for the buyer. So, Conversely, if the landlord feels that, that they're the only option, that can cost us, tens to hundreds of thousands on a deal. So we want to make sure that our posture is maintained properly throughout the negotiation. But, for leasing, which is very common, especially for startup dentists, there's a lot to negotiate. Okay. Number one is your lease rate. What is your per square footage or monthly lease rate? What are the annual escalations, which the rate in which your lease increases over every year? Okay, that is negotiable. How much time you have to do your interior build out, your construction, if there's any required, is negotiable. There's also what's called tenant improvement allowance, which is money that the landlord will gift you essentially to go towards your construction. Okay. Because ultimately the landlord owns this property. Okay. It's their asset. And when you're investing money into the space, it's in many cases increasing the value of their asset. Okay. Especially when you're signing let's say a 5 or 10 year lease, that helps their building appreciate. In many cases, the landlord will help participate in those costs. But if you don't ask, you don't get it. Okay. So that's why, you want to have someone make sure to ask for that. Okay. Properly. And in many cases, landlords don't want to offer this money. So you have to really kind of sell it and challenge them. And that's another reason why it's good to have multiple options. Because if you've got landlord X who's offering you $50 a square foot in TI allowance, tenant improvement allowance, and you've got landlord Y who's only offering you $30 a square foot in TI allowance, I like to make sure to let landlord Y know that they're not as competitive as landlord X. So if they don't increase their tenant improvement allowance, we may not get a deal done there. So you can negotiate what's called free rent as well. Once your lease starts or commences, we can try to negotiate a few months of free rent so that you can start your practice, get the clinical dialed down, and not have to worry about rent kicking in right away. Give you a little bit of peace of mind. But some other things you can negotiate, I'll kind of rapid fire here, but signage, parking, exclusivity, to try to be the only dentist in a building. You can sort of box out in basketball terms. You can negotiate a first right of refusal if you want to buy this particular building down the road, or options to purchase. So there's a lot. Okay. Everything's negotiable. On the purchasing side, it's a little more simplistic, but the purchase price is always negotiable in purchase deals. Due diligence items can be negotiated as well as like a delivery of site, especially in land deals. There's a big difference between a site being like raw land, so you got like trees and streams running through or whatever it may be, versus what's called pad site ready, which is where you've got all your utilities, the ground's cleared, it's prepared. There may be even there may already be stormwater detention installed. So there's a lot that can be negotiated in terms of like the delivery of a site to ultimately assess what this price is worth. But there's a lot that goes into it, both leasing and purchasing. And I think I covered my bases there.
Yeah, I love that. So I think that for me, like to sum that up, right, would be don't be afraid to negotiate. The odds are that it's probably negotiable, especially if you have all of the options. If you're not stuck with just one potential buyer or one potential seller, then you've got options. And now you can truly start to negotiate, and don't be afraid to negotiate it. If it's something that you don't like, or if it's something that you would prefer, don't be afraid to say something, because it might be negotiable. And something that I picked up in that too, Ryan, is just because you've gotten to the due diligence process doesn't mean that this deal is locked in and now you can't negotiate, because the due diligence process itself might start to uncover some things that you can negotiate as well. So awesome. I love that. I love that. So I think to summarize all of this stuff up for all of our listeners, guys, is like we've been touching on, the importance of making sure that you're preparing. The last thing that you want to do is be stuck where you have to sell your practice, or you have to get into another practice, or you have to relocate for whatever reason within 4 months. Because if you restrict yourself, like Ryan said, to only having a short period of time, you're not going to be able to look for those options. You're not going to be able to have the negotiation power that you potentially could have. If there's anything that you can do today over everything else, even if you're not looking at purchasing a practice or going into a transition today or tomorrow, start building up that cash. Because remember what Ryan said, cash is king. So make sure that you've got that cushion, because you never know what life is going to throw at you. Start prepping as if you're going down the road that you want to go down, but the quicker you can get that cash built up, the more secure you're going to be in whatever happens throughout life. The next step could be start really thinking about what type of practice you want and who your ideal patients are. You don't have to wait for those market reports to come out. Go to the local bars, right? Go sit in the community, like Ryan said, and just look around, because these would be your patients. This would be your community that you would be taking care of. I love, love, love that Ryan said that. And then once you start getting into the process, take the time to build a team. Take the time to surround yourself by people that have solid reputations, that have great characters, like Ryan and all of the people at Carr. Take the time to build that team, because they are going to be in your corner and they are going to make sure that you get the best possible deal and it's as smooth as possible. And then once you get into it, don't be afraid to negotiate. Don't be afraid to start voicing your opinion, because it might just be something that you can negotiate. But the more opportunities that are out there, the more stronger your negotiation power is going to be. And then once you get to the due diligence process, just be ready. Be ready to start getting the reports, doing the things, making sure that you follow through on deadlines, because it really is going to be on you. If you drag your feet getting that life insurance policy, or if you drag your feet during the due diligence process, getting the reports that you need to get, it's going to draw out that due diligence process for you, ultimately making the transition a lot longer than maybe it has to be. Ryan, is there anything else that you would like to share that maybe we didn't touch on that you'd like to share with our listeners?
I would just say, make sure to hire professional representation. Not all agents are the same. And I think in many cases, we all get kind of lumped into one box. And I would just advise you to sort of interview as you're evaluating agents, and make sure that you're working with a commercial real estate agent that is frequent to commercial real estate deals. Okay. There's a lot of residential agents that dabble in commercial real estate, and you want to be very careful, because I've got many examples of deals that were not completed successfully because someone, a certain agent just wasn't aware of all the levers that you can pull in commercial real estate. So the other piece I would say is to make sure that your agent does not have conflicts of interest. Okay. Carr Healthcare Realty is only a buyer or tenant rep only agency. Okay. Most commercial real estate agents or agencies are full service, which means they list properties. They will do buyer agency as well, property management, so on and so forth. But if you're working with an agent that's also listing a property, that can create a conflict of interest. Or if they are just trying to show you their listings, you may not be seeing the whole market. So it's great to work with someone who just is in your corner of the boxing ring, so to say, that's advocating for you. So yeah, I mean, if you have questions about your timelines or dates, feel free to reach out, have an expert track your dates. Give yourself enough time, and understand the market and your top options, and make sure that your agent has a solid game plan to deliver results.
Awesome. So much good insight, so many good tips and things to think about as you guys are getting ready to set those long-term or even short-term goals. Love that, Ryan. Ryan, thank you so much for jumping in today to help all of us get a better insight about the world of the healthcare real estate industry and what we can expect, right? Our practice owners, our businesses can expect as they get ready to start setting goals on maybe purchasing, relocating, expanding, or selling practices. You definitely shared some gold on our call today, and I'm super, super thankful for it. For any of our listeners out there that want to continue picking Ryan's brain, or maybe you want to talk to Ryan about possibly working with him, you can reach him directly at Ryan Gillespie at carr.us. Everybody enjoyed today's episode as much as we enjoyed recording it. At Dental DNA Consulting, our mission is to help dentists see that their dreams can become a reality and then help them make it happen. Until next time, this is Denae Black with Dental DNA Consulting, reminding you, dream big, plan smart, and then make it happen.